Okay, good evening. So being 6 o'clock on Monday, December the 3rd, 2018, we're going to call to order the Winooski Community Development Trust Board of Trustees meeting. So tonight, the City Council, acting in its role as the Winooski Development Trust Board of Trustees, will meet first, and then that will be followed directly by a regular City Council meeting. So we'll open tonight by calling to order the Board of Trustees meeting again for the Winooski Community Development Trust. I'd ask that everybody please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Nicole Mace.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So up first, we have approval of ratification of prior trust actions, but first, Jesse, I think you want to take a couple of moments and just kind of overview what we're doing today.
Sure. So the Winooski Community Development Trust first took action in FY18 with the allocation. So the trust holds a note that's payable by the TIF district. For the first time in FY18, that trust allocated money to the city to provide services within the purviews of the trust covenant document. We have historically approved those actions as the council through the budget process in a public meeting in accordance with open meeting laws. During the FY18 audit, the auditors recommended that because the Board of Trustees is a named body under the trust covenants, that to most closely follow the letter of the document, that you should be convening as that Board of Trustees. Your historic intent was the same. It's the same humans in the same positions, taking the same votes in open meeting in accordance with the open meeting laws, but it's just convening separately. So in order to kind of catch up and make sure we're doing this properly moving forward, we're going to ask you tonight to ratify the votes you've historically taken to allocate your trustee funds to the city for those purposes.
Great.
Anything I missed?
No, I have nothing significant to add.
Well, do you want to walk through what the votes get ratified?
Yeah, so the two votes that would need to be ratified are from June 5th, 2017. City Council approved the use of trusts to fund the community and economic development proposed FY18 budget in the amount of $300,000. And on January 29th, 2018, again during the budget process, City Council approved the use of the trust to fund the community and economic development proposed FY19 budget in the amount of $150,000 and the use of Winooski Community Development Trust Fund balance reserves in the amount of $25,060.33. So those are the two votes we're asking you to ratify.
Great. And then just to kind of tag on what Jesse said, for those who maybe don't recall budget discussions from prior years, council has made a very, again, public and much discussed and thought through decision to divert essentially some potential loan recapture payback in order to help fund economic development activity that also supports the downtown redevelopment, which of course is where the TIF district funding stream is created from the benefit of the increment between what that value was on the land versus what it is now, and the income streams then paying back that debt. This is a piece of that debt. Council decided that operationally it made sense to utilize some of those funds to ensure that we're taking good care of the economic development taking place down there in the city as a whole as a result of that redevelopment. So that's something we've very consciously done, and again very publicly done from a strategic standpoint, and it's built into this year's budget too, so it's a fitting time for it to come back up, but just wanted to notate that. And for folks at home, if you're watching this, if you're curious about it, we've got a great memorandum that I think summarizes things very simply, in addition to a number of legal creation documents if you're curious as to the composition of what the trust is comprised of and how it operates, and really encourage folks to dig into that further. But I think for this body, we've spent quite a bit of time on both the strategic decision around using the funds and what authority we have in whole. So I would entertain any questions or comments from council for staff. Great. Any questions or concerns from the public? Good, so seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for ratification of the prior trust actions relayed in the memo and documented in the package.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. We also have
Review that, like what the requirements are there and what work we have on deck that might fit into that, or needs in the community that we could try to get that funding for.
Thank you all. Okay, great. With council reports finished, we'll move on to regular items. First up tonight, we have approval of the planning commission appointment.
Have Eric and Joe come up.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna hit pause just one moment, and this is probably breaking decorum, but I kind of forgot something really important to acknowledge. In the course of welcoming Alex, just want to take a quick moment of reflection. The city's done so in a couple other venues, and we will be doing so further on, but just want to acknowledge the life of service for Dr. James Ticehurst, who we lost last month. And not just from the city's perspective from a staff, but as a community member, somebody who's tirelessly given of themselves year after year, from school board participation, school trustee participation, to representing us on various boards, committees, and commissions at a county level, state level, regional level, CSWD, the Chittenden Solid Waste Districts, especially over the past decade, and then most recently serving as the city's treasurer. But those are a list of accomplishments for a person who just gave selflessly of them, of their time and efforts and energy to try to make the community they lived in a better place. We'll have more for Dr. Ticehurst later, but didn't want tonight's meeting to go by, since it's the first one we've had, without acknowledging that. And to everybody that's close, including his family and the staff members who are here, we're incredibly sorry for your loss as well. So I apologize for breaking decorum there and cutting in. Just did not want the meeting to go without that being said.
Thank you, Seth.
Okay, we'll go back to the regular agenda for the council, or the planning commission appointment.
Yes, so tonight we have a request to appoint a member to the planning commission for the position of alternate. We had a resignation from our current, or one of the alternates, Lauren Sampson. She relocated out of the city, so she's no longer able to serve. So we went through a process in conversations with the mayor and with the planning commission chair on potential applicants, and identified Joseph Perrin as the candidate to appoint to this position. There's a memo included with your agenda outlining some of the processes, and I'll leave it at that.
Welcome. Joe, you're probably not a stranger to anyone who's attended certainly a planning commission or historical society meeting, but we're incredibly appreciative of your offer to bring forward your perspective, which I think is really unique and is going to add a great voice. So maybe we always start with, you want to tell us a little bit about what motivated you to apply for the position?
Well, I've actually been, throughout, I think, the past couple of years, been following a lot of the Development Review Board meetings as well as the Planning Commission meetings, and took a lot of interest in both of those boards, and I've just found the process to be fascinating. Every meeting I walked away from, I learned a great deal. So I saw that there was an opening with the Planning Commission, and I thought that it'd be a good opportunity to get involved. And so I've gotten a little bit of a sense of how the boards function at this point, so I think it would be a good time to get a little bit of involvement with that as an alternate.
That's great. And just not that it's the only thing you're interested in, I'm sure you bring a diverse set of interests and reasons for applying, but from a context of when we passed form-based code, we all acknowledged in doing so that we were flagging historical preservation and really how we take care of the historical features of the city as something that we needed to come back to, and that was understood when we passed that. So look forward to that moving out of the parking lot and into the traffic lane for work.
It's definitely a passion of mine, but anything Winooski is also interests me as well. So
That's great. That's great. questions, comments, concerns for Joe?
Really appreciate your interests and your the areas you want to focus on, your areas of concern in the city. So I think it's an important perspective to bring to the table, and appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you.
Glad to hear that acknowledged.
Questions from the public? Great. So we're very appreciative of your investment in time and energy. Thank you very much. And with that, I would entertain a motion for approval of appointment for Joseph Perrin to the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nicole, second by Eric. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Enjoy.
It's a nice quiet time to go and.
Yeah, there's not much going on.
Great. Next up, we also have a Development Review Board appointment.
Yes, I will handle this as well. Unfortunately, the appointee could not be here tonight. He's at home with a couple of sick children. So this is another situation where we've had some vacancies on our Development Review Board. In the past, there's been some potential challenges with making quorum, so appointing alternates has been a priority since I've been on staff. So I met with the chair of the Development Review Board, and I met with David Weisberger to interview him and gauge his interest and availability for the Development Review Board. And we both agreed that he is a good candidate to fill one of the available roles. He's an architect by practice, so that brings a really good perspective, I think, to that board and that body to round out some of the other membership that we have on that group and provide that design insight that we'll be looking for as projects move forward.
Great. Yeah, David also participated and gave a lot of feedback during the form-based code passing and engaged in a lot of those meetings and demonstrated real interest and attention to the detail of the plan. So great perspective. Questions, concerns for Eric from council? Any questions or concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval of David, let me get this right, Weissenberg for the motion by House, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next up is discussion and approval for the all resident voting charter change commission.
So Councillor Covey brought this up a bit during council updates as well. So we had previously discussed at this meeting bringing forward the charter for the Charter Change Commission for approval, as well as appointees. What I've attached to your agenda here is the proposed charter with an adoption date of today if you so choose. We have received 2 applications to date. And then, as Eric mentioned, the school trustees did meet, so we've included the minutes there so you can see also from what Eric shared in council updates from their minute perspective as well. And really we had committed to bringing this back to you, so we're bringing it back to you looking for either approval of the charter and any other direction you'd like to provide on how to best move forward. This is a very similar draft to the draft you saw on November 5th, just with track changes accepted and a new date.
Great to see the school participation. We're appreciative of them doing that and look forward to that perspective being part of the committee. It's important. The one thing just that I think I would flag is given the timing of this, one thing we'll have to sort of unravel is council participation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to recommend that we bring that back in the next meeting, and that we be prepared for council to review our participating liaisons to that group. Mm-hmm. So everybody can think about capacity and their interest in doing that, and we can discuss that at the next meeting. Any other questions, concerns regarding the content of the Charter Change Committee? Charter?
So I just wanted a little bit, I was confused by the school board's, response or the discussion. So do they want to send one person? Like have one seat and have two people in and out of it? Or one school board member and they'll find another person representing the school district to also serve, but the school board seat may have individuals changing depending on availability?
So I think we had written the charter as 2 school board seats, and they want to retain those seats, but with the ability to not specifically name and have it like, you know, because with everybody else who's going to be on, we will be appointing the voting members. They would like the opportunity to have the seats, but if one of those appointed members can't make it, they still want to have 2 school board members that can be a part of 2 school board seats that they could rotate through if necessary.
I'm just not clear how that would.
I think the way that I saw it was either Tori or Alex, one can make the substantial commitment to be there at every meeting, and one or the other may not be able to, and that they would like to be able to sub somebody in and out if that's the case.
Somebody other than themselves?
Correct. That's the
But I
way.
think somebody from the school board.
From the school board?
Yeah, so if Alex couldn't make it, then Matt or
Okay, so
Jen.
at one point I thought they were talking about maybe having one of the liaisons serve in one of the roles, which I think would be useful in terms of bringing that perspective. The liaisons that work with the New American families, they have actually a lot of direct contact with families. And so I just don't know whether that came up as part of did they talk about that? It was just that they were gonna be school board members.
Yeah, they didn't bring it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think theoretically it's accepting the fact that there could be some slight, but that the end part that I heard at the very end of it and watching the piece was Sean reiterating that we will have 2 people from the board there. So he very firmly cemented that. Other questions, concerns?
I think my only question was, I think I had sent you the version that we had talked about at our last meeting of changing, you know, presumption of, and we could have gone back and edited, but that the school trustee members shall serve rather than, I think this might have been the version before that. So there may have been some minor changes, but I don't know if we need to make any changes to the language there to accommodate that request on their behalf.
I'm sorry, Eric, you had sent me an updated version?
No, Seth
Oh.
had asked me for it.
Yeah, I mean, at the last meeting, the direction was that there were going to be some updates to the charter, and 2 days before their meeting, we were able to finally share that with them. And Jesse, I mean, you were copied on that, but from a content perspective, is there anything specific you want to flag, or is it just the 2 school board trustee members may serve as voting members of the committee?
I just didn't know what language we might need to accommodate if they need to sub somebody else in, if that would work with how we've written it.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Any other questions, concerns from council? Any questions, concerns from the public? So seeing, oh, I'm sorry.
It sounds like you've had 2 people apply so far, so you're still looking for folks. Have you been able to reach out to any of the community members who would be most likely to be non-citizens or New Americans generally?
I don't know if others have. I've reached out to a few people who have since moved out of Winooski. Couldn't serve on the committee from my personal contacts. But.
I've been in touch with Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program, and I know Paul reached out to a couple of organizations, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I think African Americans living in Vermont, and there was another one.
Association of Africans Living in Vermont.
Yeah.
He also sent it to the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program, VRIP.
And the Somali Bantu Association,
Mm-hmm.
Mom.d.
Sounds like a resounding yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I forwarded the email to a few people and said, please share, but, I think the hard part's probably sitting, this probably takes a sit down, so if, what I would say publicly, if there are folks that are in the community that you think would be a great candidate, if you're watching at home or sitting in the stands, to please be sure to pass those names along, either via the city manager is a great place to start, and she can filter it to council, or we can be sure that they receive the position description, because this is something that might take a little bit more targeted outreach in terms of engaging somebody. Thank you, good question. Other questions, concerns from the public? Okay, so seeing and hearing none, this is on as a discussion or approval item. Sounds like there's not a lot of concern, so I entertain a motion for approval of the All Resident Voting Charter Change Commission Charter.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Eric, second by Christine. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, motion carries. All right, item D. I really want to make sure we leave enough time for the grant. So if we could get through item D in 10 minutes or, all right. Item D is a discussion of the FY20 City Manager's budget presentation. Just trying to buy you time to get the presentation set up.
You might have to poke the power button too.
I acknowledge this is the first meeting where I feel like we've seen the updated logo often.
Yes, since the full official launch of the new branding campaign will come with the launch of the website, which is right now on target for before town meeting day. We're trying, all the big documents that will come out that will have life beyond that point, we're trying to use the new model, including the master plan. All right, so first I want to acknowledge that this is also our first big finance question with our officially appointed finance director here at the table as well. So welcome Angela into that role and to the table for that. So this is our proposed FY20 budget. This is what we will be talking about today. So to start, we sent around at the end of last week a lot of information. It's before you tonight in your budget books. It's also for those watching at home can follow along on the website at winooski.org/city budgets. It is up there as well in the complete document. What is included in your budget book that you have in front of you is a section with a memo from me, this presentation, a bunch of overview information from each of the department heads. This year we've given you both the roll-up budgets as well as the line item budget, so you can really see all of the detail there. We've also included the completely rebuilt capital improvement plan documents for all the funds, and then some appendices materials, and your binder is really meant to be a place where you can keep information over the course of all of these discussions. Much like last year, we are presenting the budget to you in its totality, meaning both the general fund budget, which is raised by property tax dollars, as well as all of the enterprise and special revenue fund budgets. So tonight we're going to do a quick probably not so quick, overview of the process, the goals, how this budget aligns to our strategic vision statement. I'm going to give a bit more of a overview of the general fund budget, but then a quick overview of all the funds, summary, and talk to you about what's next. This is really the first night in a series of conversations where we'll go area by area through the budget and discuss it in detail before you all approve a budget to send to the residents at town meeting day. Does that make sense? Good place to start. So this is where we've been. So on September 4th, you had a discussion about approving this process. And then on October 1st, we had a shared discussion about budget goals. Tonight, this is the overview presentation, and then you see coming up those individual area presentations, weekly meetings in December and January. It's going to be awesome. And then January 22nd, we've reserved for any discussion you want to have, follow-up information you've requested through the process, really your meeting to make changes. January 28th is the day by which you have to approve the final dollar amount and set the agenda warning for town meeting day. February 20th will be the traditional community dinner hosted at the AOCC by the Winooski Partnership for Prevention, where we will go over the city budget and the school will go over their budget, and then of course town meeting day on March 5th. So in the beginning of October, we had a conversation about goals, and while you didn't take any specific goals, these are this is the guidance you gave us. So you asked us to present an FY20 budget that provided level services, so didn't reduce services, but also didn't have significant adds. You asked us to include resources to both meet the council and staff shared priorities, as well as move forward with the bond vote for the Main Street Revitalization Project and the Myers Pool Replacement Project. You asked us to look at some new revenue streams, and you asked us to always attend to the fund balances and present those with the budget as well. So the dollars and money are really those resources that allow us to carry out the vision and priorities of the city. So I think it's always important to go back and look at where we've been. So FY18, which is the year that ended June 30th of 2018, was a really big year for our city. So you see outlined up there some of our accomplishments. We completed the Economic Development Strategic Plan, the Marketing and Branding Study, we got Opportunity Zone designation, responded to almost 8,000 police calls for service and 400 fire calls for service. We did the preliminary engineering on the Main Street Revitalization Project and started the headworks engineering. We participated in the Winooski Bridge Advisory Committee. We stood up the community outreach team, partnership with Howard Center and the police department. We stood up the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority, which is the entity that will potentially in the future oversee regional dispatch. And we started the preliminary engineering for the Myers Pool as well. Just to highlight a few. So this year we're continuing a lot of that work that's done, and in addition adding in the municipal, really moving the municipal master planning process forward, which will be, I think, one of our major accomplishments for this year. That will be the document that outlines for us a shared vision of what we want our community to be for the next 5 to 8 years and into the future. We'll be launching, as I mentioned, a new website this winter, as well as a new parking app. We've revamped our complete capital improvement plan for the city across funds that you will see outlined here. Moved Main Street, Headworks, and the pool forward. We bought a new fire truck that the chief is very excited about. The Housing Commission, as you heard about earlier, has done a huge amount of work looking at an affordable housing trust fund and inclusionary zoning. And we've continued those public safety initiatives with the community outreach team, regional dispatch, as well as finalized the police department strategic plan. And then looking forward to FY20, really we're looking to continue the momentum of the things we've stood up in the last couple of years. So move forward with implementing the master plan and the zoning changes that will result, fully build out the TIF district and that global settlement we've been discussing, move forward with Main Street design, the pool construction. We are also proposing with this budget to do a water line replacement project on Hickok Street that you'll hear more about. Looking to continue our partnership with Champlain Housing Trust at developing an affordable housing home ownership opportunity on Mallets Bay Ave, and looking to expand community services programming. Obviously, these are the strategies that staff has come up with, but will be discussed with a complete picture with the council after town meeting day to identify next year's priorities as well. So what do you have before? So all of that is our vision, what we're trying to achieve with this budget. And this is what you have by numbers in front of you. So going into this budget process, we've looked at two things. We've tried to build the budget in a way where operations and capital are clearly articulated and outlined. Looking to, again, build that level services budget that allows us to maintain operations of the city while significantly increasing our allocations for Main Street revitalization and the pool. We've built those separately so we can, over the course of the next 2 months, work with them and play with them and see how things impact those two numbers. We were also presenting to you a level services budget and a level services budget with a few additional ads that we've identified through, and we've heard you all talk about through the last year, that are not aligned with the level services budget, but are things that we have historically talked about. And since they were ads, we wanted to call them out very specifically for you to see if you wanted to actually add those in. So the upshot of the level services budget with the operations and capital included is a 5.75% increase in the tax rate, about almost 6 pennies. The impact to the average homeowner would be $130.79 next year. That's an annual cost. With those small additions, and we'll go into details in a minute about what those are, it's a 6% increase, operations and capital increase to the tax rate, with $136.52 impact to the average homeowner. I do want to call out that that is being defined as a home valued at $225,000, which may be low in our community right now, but it's the number we've used, so we didn't want to change that from an orientation. We certainly can through these discussions if you'd like to look at those numbers a different way. Does that make sense how we've called out the operations and the capital separately? People with me? Okay. So in building this budget, we've made some assumptions. So we are assuming a cost of living increase of 2.8%. That may be trending a little high right now, but was exactly between the July and August numbers. Our health insurance rates actually came back quite good for 2019. So we will be experiencing only a 2.4% increase to our 2019 health insurance rates. Health insurance obviously is done on a calendar year, so that will be the first half or the second half, the first half of the fiscal year, the second half of the calendar year. So we are modeling a 9% increase for calendar year 20, which is the second half of the fiscal year, just to be conservative. That's much more in line with what we've seen historically. We'll see how it goes. Based on Eric Vorwald and John Audie spent some hours with our assessor to look at the building permits and zoning permits we've received to date, and make some projections about our grand list. These obviously could very significantly change before April 1st, but right now we're projecting a 0.75% increase in our grand list. And just as a reminder for people, the grand list is the total assessed value of all of our property in the city, which becomes the number by which we set the tax rate with the expenditure budget. So that equals about a $40,000 add to the general fund. So what is included in this level services budget? So it's a pretty wordy slide. There's a lot more detail about this in the memo and in the budget book online if people are interested. So what's included in here is staffing for the strategic vision with 2 significant changes. One, we are recommending moving what's currently funded as a part-time accounting clerk to a full-time accounting clerk. That's really, as the leadership team spent time meeting and developing this budget, a resource we feel we need to implement these very significant capital projects. When you're spending millions of dollars a year to subs to build things, that's a lot of invoicing, a lot of processing, a lot of grant management. And with right now one body doing that work, really feeling like we needed some redundancy in that position. Additionally, we're recommending the elimination of one AmeriCorps position within community services. Because of the unemployment rate right now, this has been a really hard position for us to fill. We've yet to fill it this year. Ray and his team have restructured the staffing within community services and believe they can provide the level services without this position. You've heard us talk at the last meeting quite comprehensively about the non-union compensation plan. That's the look at ensuring that all of our non-union positions are paid equitably and rebuilding our pay structure for those positions. So this proposal fully implements those equity improvements. Right now, we still have a number of positions that fall below the step one grade, the step one of the grades in which the positions are placed. So this budget gets everyone into the grade system, but because there was a fairly significant price tag associated with that, we are recommending only adjusting the whole pay scale by a 1% COLA this year. That does have negative impacts on some people who are at the top of the range. But for the average employee within that pay plan, it's still a 3.23% pay increase in FY20 with the steps. The O'Brien Community Center, as you may remember from last year, came over to the general fund from an enterprise fund from FY18 into FY19. We had anticipated using the reserves incrementally to lower the impact to the taxpayers because we have not been able to fully lease that space this year. We are going to use up the reserves in FY19, so that will have a $28,000 impact in FY20. In other words, the taxpayers will be subsidizing that building operations to the tune of $28,000 in FY20. And that's solely for solely for building operations. Included in this budget are our continued investments in technology. So there's funding for the Exchange transition, the cloud transition that we're currently doing, as well as a computer replacement plan and Adobe licenses for City Hall staff. This will enable us to implement searchable PDFs with the new website, which will let you all, when you're looking, for example, at council packets, search for keywords within documents, which I think will be a significant customer service improvement. Obviously, there is a huge amount of capital investment included in this budget. So those include the investments for Main Street revitalization next steps, the Myers Memorial Pool. As we mentioned, the Public Works team has identified Hickok Street as very in need of a water line replacement project. And then a repaving project. If you've driven down Hickok Street recently, you probably can attest to that as well. So we are recommending moving forward with that project this year. We've also included additional funds in this budget for street trees. We've had a number of street trees this year that needed replacing. Those are important pieces of our infrastructure in the city and have not been funded historically. And it also allows us to maintain the plowing contract to support the work of the Public Works crews during those very heavy snowstorms over the winter. We are recommending a couple of revenue adjustments. First, we are recommending implementing a fingerprinting service here at the city within the police department. And then we are also recommending the adoption of local options a local option sales tax and a local options rooms, meals, and alcohol tax. That's 1% on both of those, and there'll be more details about that later on. So what's included in the additional budget. So the previous slide was about the level services budget as presented. That's the column that you will see in your detail that just says FY20 proposal, and then there will be an FY20 proposal with additions, and these are the 3 additions we've called out. The council and staff had a conversation during our policy, our strategies and policy retreat last spring about looking at lowering barriers to participation, both for people thinking about participating in the council and boards and commissions. So we had talked about, for example, buying technology, or providing childcare or other support that may enable other members of our community to participate. So that's a $5,000 additional ad we've included. We have included $6,700 to assist in funding the school newsletter, which is the monthly newsletter that goes into all the mailboxes in the city. And then you also heard this fall a presentation from the Winooski Valley Parks District. As you know, historically, we've funded that at about $4,000 a year. Their actual request this year is closer to $16,000. We have included a $1,000 add to kind of incrementally start working our way up to that amount. Want to give a quick sense of where this general fund money is going. So the total general fund proposal here is $7.3 million. About 79% of that comes solely from property taxes and pilot payment. Then you see how it's broken down across other revenue streams. 4% of that would come from the new local options tax. So if that were not included, if the council decided not to move forward with those, we would have to talk about either a reduction or an increase in the tax rate to accommodate that. And then you see that within the general fund, how those expenditures are broken out across service delivery areas. So the largest percentage of the general fund goes to fund our police services at almost $900 a year for the annual property taxpayer. That shifts slightly when you look across all funds, which we'll get to in a minute. So I think it's important, oh, look at that little blue line, oh, there it goes away. I think it's important to call out what is not funded in these proposals for your consideration, and you can always move things around within these budgets. So we have not included funds to further support the work of the Chittenden County Public Safety Authority as we move towards potential regionalization. I believe those are one-time expenses that we will be looking for fund balance to do over the next couple of months. You heard at one of our last meetings about an additional request from CCTV for $6,000. Again, that's not in this proposal, could be added back in or fund balance identified. Fully funding the Winooski Valley Parks District. It does not include a request for downtown Winooski. They're currently still working on that request, and again, may have potentially to use fund balance for that request. And then, of course, affordable housing is an ongoing conversation. We have not requested or proposed in here using any tax rate money as seed funding for that fund. As I mentioned in the beginning, this budget presents both a general fund budget, which is the dollars raised from property taxes and fees and fines, as well as the enterprise fund. So this gives you a revenue picture across our entire budget. So of our entire budget, only 52% of our expenditures comes from the general fund. And then you see how it's broken out otherwise. Obviously, the TIF district is the largest other single percentage, which is property taxes, but designated solely for debt. And those expenditures go, you can see now the percentages shift a little and go majority towards public works, which makes sense when you think about public works operations and capital investment. And these are all in your packet as well. So I want to give you a few, obviously we'll dig way into the weeds during the individual presentations, but give you some highlights from the other funds as well. So with this budget, and as we've talked about through the Main Street project development, we are also recommending rate increases in both the water fund and the wastewater fund. We're recommending a 2.5% increase in the water fund and a 3% increase in the wastewater fund. Looking back at rates history, this would be the first time rates were increased in those funds since 2012. And with these rate increases, we would still be below the average of our surrounding communities. It is needed to maintain this growing investment in capital. Both of those funds will also be looking for the use of reserves to balance that those operation and capital expenditures in FY20. In the TIF district, we're anticipating a very small percentage growth in the grand list. We're prioritizing paying the debt on the external debt obligation. So that's the primary debt held with TD Bank and with PCORs. And have made some assumptions you will see in your spreadsheets about the global settlement discussions that we are in talks with parties about right now. What I mean when I say we're prioritizing the external debt obligations is that we are maintaining the $150,000 contribution to the repayment of the Winooski Community Development Fund. That's the level at which we funded it in FY19, and we're recommending continuing that. We can continue current operations at that level, and as we see more increment growth within the TIF district, we'll increase that allocation once we see that increment growing. This does still leave a fund balance of $200,000 within the CDC budget to fund potential future projects. The other big capital project included in this budget is the consideration of a new parking facility on Abenaki Way. John and Ryan Lambert and I have started calling this the Abenaki Garage. Don't know if that will stick, but as a way to talk about it. This is part of the global settlement discussions with the new municipal parking facility on lot 7D under additional upper floor development. So that is captured in this proposal. Community Justice Fund continues with the existing DOC funding at level services and level staffing. The Community Services Fund is looking for almost 19,000 in Thrive reserves, bringing the balance to about 60,000. So it's still quite a significant fund balance there. But because we are seeing the revenues from that service delivery not keep up with the expenditures needed, we are proposing a $1 a day and $2 a day in the summer rate increase for fee-paying families only. And Ray will talk much more about this during his presentation. And then on the rental registry side, we are looking to increase the revenues to reflect both the growth we're seeing in the city as well as a increased partnership with Winooski Housing Authority. And that budget does anticipate making a small contribution to fund balance for that total fund balance there, and looking to start using that as a grant fund to bring people into compliance where needed. So just because that's a lot of information, I want to give you one slide where you could kind of see everything, or all the big things. So the total proposed budgets across all funds is $14.2 million, almost $14.3 million almost, with a general fund of $7.3 million. It does include funding for 4 significant capital projects in the city: the Main Street Revitalization Project, the Myers Pool Replacement Project, a Hickok Street Water Line Replacement Project and repaving, and the Abenaki Parking Garage. The revenue streams, it's 100% increase in capital expenditures. We are doubling our expenditures towards capital with this budget than we have from past years. It includes those rate increases that we talked about. Here you see the dollars that we project associated with those 2 local options taxes right now. So it's $133,000 for the rooms, meals, and alcohol local options tax, and $144,000 on the sales side. And then you see how that impacts the tax rates. So the other thing we want to be very clear about is what to fully deliver that entire package of things. There are several votes you all will need to take, and then there are several votes the residents will need to consider. So for the council, what's before you for consideration is you'll need to approve the general fund budget and the warning for town meeting day. You'll need to individually approve the enterprise and special revenue funds that you solely have the ability to approve. You'll need to approve the associated rate increases and the fee ordinance chapter update to reflect the fingerprinting, which is a new service area that we don't currently call out in the fee chapter. We would need a bond vote for the Abenaki Way Municipal Garage. We would also need a bond vote for the Hickok Street water line replacement. Both of the numbers associated with both of those bond votes are included in this budget. I want to make it very clear that the bond vote for the Abenaki Way Garage, while a general obligation bond for the city because of the size of the parking fund, is intended to be paid for solely by the parking revenues and not by the taxpayers. And then the approval of the local options sales for sales and rooms, meals, and alcohol taxes. The residents would then need to take 5 votes. They would need to take the vote on the general fund budget, the 2 bond votes, and they'd need to individually vote on the 2 local options taxes. Does that make sense? So that is a lot, and I want to just take a moment, because this will be a lot of material to review over the next couple months, to thank you for your attention to all of those details and your thoughtful review. And this budget really is a team effort of the entire leadership team from start to finish. I get to be the spokesperson for it, but it's really the work of Angela and all of the department heads getting this hard thinking done. And then special thanks to our finance director for pulling it all together and putting it into good math. So I will stop now, and we are happy to answer any questions about what's presented here, as well as we have a bunch of meetings now together. If there's information you already know you're going to want to see as you consider what's before you, we're happy to take those questions now and go back and find answers throughout this process. If there's additional information you need, we are wide open to that as well. The more and better information we put out to you all, the more will be available to the public as they have to make decisions as well.
This is by far the most comprehensive and straightforward budget presentation at the onset of the budget process that we have ever received. I'll say that definitively, and I'll say that for the course of the entire history of the city, because I saw a lot of those old ones too, and incredibly impressive, and very, very appreciative of all the time that went into making this possible in the budget. From all of you, that's a tremendous amount of work and focus, and we are incredibly appreciative of the work and time that went into putting this forward, and the way that it was presented in a very linear fashion and highlighting the major issues and items. So typically, just for benefit of Christine, how usually, quite honestly, a lot of times in years past, this would be like a 10-minute agenda item, because we would literally just kind of drop the spreadsheet on everybody and say, hey guys, globally, this is what we're looking at. Start building your questions, concerns. I think in this presentation, there's a number of things that have been identified, but just want to point out, I think that process schedule is really important to understand from a flow perspective, because we're going to have an opportunity to sort of take that deep dive into each of the department investment areas over the course of the next 2 months, month and a half, as we prepare to get to a point where we can really present something.
Question about that.
Yeah.
So for that process, what I'm hearing is that like during those focus meetings, we can dig into like line items here in that area, and then at that meeting on the 22nd is where we would actually make decisions about whatever we surfaced, versus like, at the end of that each area. Okay.
Right.
Cool.
That's where a lot of times, if there's you hate to say it like this, but if there are conflicting funding priorities, right? It can sometimes be nice to have the full perspective of whatever the asking fund is. Maybe, let's just be blunt about one of the items. Maybe you feel strongly about funding CCTV versus funding Winooski Valley Parks District, for example. That penultimate meeting tends to be where a lot of that sorts out, or in those sort of conversations. But I will say that, as Jesse just pointed out, calling that out as early as possible. Number one, what information, data, or questions you have. Number two, any ideas that you might have that you're going to decide to bring in from afar or afield as early as possible. If you've had something in your mind and just don't feel like you've expressed it in terms of what you think we should be investing in, or as you start to look at this budget, you start to think, boy, I really thought we were going to spend more money here. Getting that to them as quickly as humanly possible is preferable, because we don't want to be trying to make those huge structural changes late in the game. That's when mistakes happen and messes get made, and it just doesn't make for a very good conversation or productive meeting.
And if I can just underline
Please.
that point a little, as those ideas come up through the individual department budgets or offline as you're reviewing things, please do feel free to send those to us so we can start modeling. One of the things that makes us very anxious in those last 2 meetings is by the end of the January 28th meeting, we need an actual dollar amount to put on the ballot. And when we get ideas of funding, requests for additional funding or shifting around in funding, that sometimes has impacts in other funds. So for example, if you said we want to add a public works position, well, that position could be funded out of 4 different funds. It's very hard for us to do that math on the fly. So if we have that a few days in advance, we can model it out and give you the best information with which to make decisions. So we're not actively
Editing
spreadsheets.
lives.
So, on that note, like I've already looked through all of them, and there's plenty of items that I don't understand what they are. Would it be appropriate to like email you ahead of time to call those out?
That would be ideal, and then we can either respond in writing and make that public through a council packet, so everyone can see those questions and hear those responses, including the public, or if it requires more of a conversation, we can be prepared to answer those
Okay.
questions in the meetings. That would
Thank
be
you.
ideal.
And pardon me if I missed the group email just because I've got one on my desktop, but do they have the Excel version?
They do not have the Excel version. Nope.
Can we do that, please?
They're all in the PDFs are all in your document, but
And so what I would do, for example, I've got questions, Christine. So you're prescriptive. I say, what book, what line in the workbook, right? Like line 462 in sheet 3. What is this? And what, the nice thing on the budget where you see it in the PDF notes too is if there's been changes or adjustments, there's usually a little narrative there on the side too that describes this is what the change or adjustment is. Because usually that's what your eyes go to. You see, here's
Yeah,
the
a number that's
FY actual versus budgeted, and then what's it look like for next year? And if we're $25,000 over the expenditures from last year, why aren't we budgeting for $25,000 more in that fund this year, or vice versa? If we're spending $50,000 less, did that line item get reduced, or what's being added where? So that's a good way to do that. Is I would just recommend sending that along. Not that it can't be called out here, whatever you learned that was of concern or interest to you. Just philosophically, after saying the gigantic thank you for staff for doing this, right, and I do say this every year, and it probably makes, especially the city manager squirm a little bit, right, is that this ultimately is your budget, and you have to pass the budget, you have to own it, and you have to convince the people, your neighbors, to vote for it. So you should be confident in it, and you should question things, and if you have ideas or things that you think should be in there, then this is your time to do that. From a process perspective, what we try to do over the course of the year is have these directional conversations about here's what we're trying to achieve, here's the things we're trying to do, and then staff all works together to try to say, given those priorities, this is the budget it takes to accomplish that, right? So this is their best effort to do that, to achieve that. But it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to question things. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to put forward ideas. And in a lot of cases, things that go on next year's budgets get created during these conversations. Because those philosophical things to say, things like translation services come up, or services like that, because we don't always get to stop and look at a whole departmental operation in these types of senses. So I just would encourage you to not just accept these numbers as being this giant overwhelming document that you don't have any power or authority over, because you have to, we own it, right? And at the end of the day, it's your budget that you have to vote out. As hard as they work on it, and as much as it dictates what day-to-day life looks like here, that's important.
That said, we're not the operational experts
Mhm.
either, so we need to be comfortable with the budget, we need to understand it, we need to own it,
Mhm.
but we need to be careful not to substitute our own judgment for that of the professionals that spent a great deal of time putting this together. That doesn't mean we don't question it or clarify when we don't understand why something's being proposed or why, certain assumptions are being made and whether or not we, want to push back on those assumptions. But I do want to just caution against an approach that has us sort of digging into the line items and starting to say, because I think you can start to, as Jesse said earlier, a lot of pieces are interconnected, and by eliminating one piece, you could send off a cascade of other issues that I trust will be flagged for us, but it can consume a lot of time and energy if that's the approach that gets taken.
Totally fair criticism and comments.
It's not criticism.
No,
Both of
it's
those comments are.
it's a good balance,
Yeah,
right? And it's
yeah.
one that, especially the first year in doing a budget, can be hard.
Yeah. I'd say definitely ask as many questions as you can think of during your first time around, because you'll start to become more comfortable with, it's a huge task.
Well, and quite frankly as well, we see this process as part of the public education campaign, getting ultimately to the residents deciding whether they want to invest in these resources and this vision for the city. And if you all have questions about these lines, they certainly will. So the more of those answers we can put out in the public to say, here is why we're doing X, Y, and Z, the more trust everyone, us, you, and the voters will have in the services that we have the privilege of providing them. So please do, we really welcome the questions. If you haven't met any of these 9 people, we really like to talk about what we do. So nobody is going to shy away from answering questions for hours. Just get us started.
Just a couple things I think I flagged in mostly meetings with you guys too. I think it would be good if we could, given the O'Brien Community Center, just in the community services presentation especially, I know I would benefit from just an overview of the debt structure and profile on that building, just so we understand long-term what we're running into. I think the thing that we've struggled with too, that I don't have the smooth answer for, and I flagged this during our first budget meeting, is where and when we talk about fund balance and what that looks like for next year. So I think that's something, and I mean, I know it's called out in here, but from a structural standpoint in terms of any decision-making apparatus.
Yep. So it is called out in each budget, but also I do want to, I think it's page 58 of your budget book, is the current fund balance amounts as of the end of FY19. So that's one that I have flagged for myself and think we'll continually go back to. So just want to call out that that complete detail is there for you.
Yeah, I think that's, from a general perspective, this is a healthier fund balance than we have certainly seen in my time. So I think that there's, a good sort of policy direction conversation to be had regarding what to hold back there and what the big one-time expense item needs might be for the city, and sort of what the long-term direction on that fund is, because it feels like that's something, I mean, we have to have money that's rainy day where stuff pops up and we have to cover very quickly, but that's getting to the point where I think it's something we need to have a sort of more strategic conversation about.
SDR.
Oh, the SDR Island truck? Boy, dangle a few lights in front of it. And the only other thing I think that's outside the box that I haven't mentioned yet, so I'm sorry to throw it out here, is I think eventually, from a public standpoint, leveraging of funds would be really interesting to be able to talk to people about. So we've brought forward the fact that this year from the capital it's $959,000, etc., is being spent. Might be, if it's not too challenging and difficult, on the revenue side from grants and matching funds that we're receiving from other sources, to be able to speak to what our fund leverage percentage was. And I'm thinking about that too on the community services side. We talk about it a lot, and I think do a good job messaging that. But it might be an interesting thing, because you hear people say a lot like, well, why don't you guys just go get some grants? As like there's lots of free money floating out there, and I don't think people always realize how much money you guys actually do strategically secure using the taxpayer dollar and then getting additional investment back from those other sources. So that would, and I don't know how complicated that is, so I'm sorry for throwing that out ad hoc, but, and maybe it's a departmental specific presentation. Yeah.
I have a question, similar, in similar vein with the O'Brien. Does this budget make the assumptions about Main Street and the pool that we looked at most recently? Like, we got that big spreadsheet with how we were gonna implement, both of those over time in the TIF funding. So I'm curious if that's reflected here, or if there's more changes that have happened to that since we last saw it.
What's here is reflective of that last spreadsheet.
Okay.
But we certainly, with the Public Works presentation and the CIP presentation, will bring those back so you see not only the investment for FY20, but what other decisions will follow after that FY20, those FY20 decisions. Because quite frankly, there are going to be other decisions in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 to continue that debt service obligation.
And on that note, for us, you know, we spent a lot of time digging into the pool, and we looked at different scenarios there and have like decided how to move forward with that. And I don't think we've spent the time we need to with Main Street looking at different alternatives there and how to move forward with that in the long term. So that's something that is on my mind as I think about these numbers.
And so that, my recollection too from that meeting was a strong recommendation that to, if you've got specific staging questions, to set up time to with Jesse and John, just to go through like what the different components of that are. Because I know I've had some of those conversations and have a personal reflection on like what the staging looks like versus not, but that would probably be my best recommendation on getting that prepared. Because I guess if there's a specific direction change versus what's being presented here, that would be really important to ask. In other words, when the number comes forward, that meeting will be challenging if there's not a specified model. We don't want to try to say on the fly, can you back off a certain percentage of expense for this year because you're going to stage it differently in the next. So, and I think I will all benefit from a refresher on exactly what that looks like, just because it's been a month and a half. So, and luckily, Public Works and CIP is pretty early in the process, which is good. I just want to call out too, you know, you all did fantastic jobs on your budgets, but having a CIP plan that looks like this is something that we've asked for, and then sometimes just really struggled to have conversations about capital improvement investments in the absence thereof. So just want to give a huge shout out to John. I mean, this is not the right words, but really freaking great work. Like, it's, and I know it's going to be a living process and document, but I mean, it's really clear and it's a lot more informative than things we've seen in the past. So Jesse, Angela, John, thanks for all of your work to make that possible. I think that's really going to create a much more informed conversation than that long spreadsheet that you used to love so much.
So much.
So much.
And kudos to Councilor Mace for making sure that stayed on our.
I still don't understand.
No, but that was great. It was a really, really welcome change from years past to see that like that. So thank you. Process questions. Is there any general questions or thoughts about things that would be helpful, given what you're saying? And some of it, you know, I mean, you'll see when we get the first presentation, you know, you might be able to get a hint from that. You know, not to sound trite, but it's, you know, if someone's got a kind of question of what the presentation is going to look like, you're going to get a model of it. And if you've got things that you think are missing in that. I mean, it's kind of a summary of what's been done and what's planning to be done from a service provision standpoint. I would say community services usually is the one where we have the stuff that comes out of left field the most often, where somebody's like, I want to buy more kickball equipment out of nowhere. So if you've got some of those ideas or questions, that's right.
What does the public presentation look like? How much detail? And I assume that'll be at the community dinner.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
So this is where it transitions from being a city manager budget to a council budget.
yeah. What I'll do is maybe I'll share the PowerPoint from last year. Would probably be the easiest way to express it.
Sure.
You know, we tend to structure it very similar actually to what was just done here, in that we say, this was last year's budget, here's what you gave us, here's what we did with it.
Okay.
And then we highlight, you know, the big kind of pressing things or challenges. And then we try to be very specific about, okay, so it's not just a number that's changing, here's why it's changing, here's the service that's being added. If we remove the service as a result of the budget, here's what we're removing or changing. You know, for example, we would note, hey, we're reducing a Thrive, a person in that position, not Thrive, that's the wrong word, excuse me. We're reducing an AmeriCorps position and adding capacity to the finance and accounting side of things. So we'll note that out so that people know specifically what you're doing. So, you know, and then we'd highlight the big projects that are being added. This year's going to be a little different though, just because of the bond votes. I think we're going to have to be very, we've already kicked off some of the conversations about that, very prescriptive about here's what you're voting on, here's what the implication is. And we are, you know, just for other folks' benefits, is we're having a conversation right now about trying to set up, for example, an opportunity for businesses in the next week or two to come to a meeting here to talk about the 1% sales tax, just to get that out there and get that engaged, so that the business community doesn't feel, you know, hooked from that, you know, from behind, or disadvantaged in a way. So from the outlet perspective, which is something I think we could also certainly talk about from an outreach perspective, we do CCTV, we do a presentation at the senior center, and we do the community dinner, and then the night before, so the community dinner is stated there, and then the town meeting day presentation is the night before town meeting day at the school. And their charter changed this year, which I think is actually, it has to get approved, doesn't it? Yeah, so it's not going to go into effect. So I'm on the hook for 2 hours again. But it's, you know, it's not always attended probably like we would like to see it. So we can think about ways to go about that. There have been times in the past where we have produced budget flyers and, you know, kind of simple scaled promotional material to it, and we can certainly talk about that as well. But then in addition to that, school newsletter, you know, from a written standpoint, tend to do, you know, historically I've done a summary for Front Porch Forum for council, just explaining, you know, what the budget is and what it looks like. And then I have probably 4 stations every year, and the Free Press also do summary articles that just have us go through it. And I've typically done, you know, accepted all those interviews and gone and given those summaries when asked to. What else? What am I missing?
It's pretty comprehensive. I do think it will be a little different this year just because of those 5 votes. You know, that is a unique challenge in how those 5 votes are interlinked. So for example, if the general fund were to pass but not one of the local options taxes, we would be coming back to you and saying, what do we stop doing, where do we cut? And how, you know, I think this is part of this iterative process over the next 2 months of what are the questions that arise from your minds about this work that we're in all day, every day. You know, you were the one who came up with the yellow light for the Main Street conversation, which, you know, we hadn't thought of, and was a really wonderful way to talk to the community about what that meant. I think a similar thing, I mean, not necessarily words like that, but a similar conversation might happen over the next couple of months about how we explain, one, are we comfortable? Are these 5 votes the 5 votes we want to take as a community? And if so, or if something different, how do we talk to the public about that? And that may inform some of the outreach between your votes and the town meeting day votes. And really, that's why all of our minds working on this together is going to result in the best product.
We plan on doing it all here at
We are
City
planning on
Hall.
doing it all here.
So in the past, we've rotated around to varying degrees of success to different operational centers. So we've done, for example, the Public Works presentation in the fire department. Every year, there's been a fire call, and it's been kind of a mess. The Public Works department, frankly, the building's not very warm. And that served as a problematic issue. So I think this year, unless anybody has any severe criticisms, we were planning on doing them all from the comfort of our seats here.
And in addition to that, we have requested CCD coverage of all of these meetings, which is an add from the traditional schedule. I think they're working on accommodating that just through staffing. Of course, every municipality has lots of meetings, so it's a challenge with staffing. But those are also great. Those are all available online, and people can go back and watch individual presentations as well.
So, and just kind of broadly, something else to think about is with these presentations, I've certainly always offered while I'm in this seat to share it with a counselor too. It's good to have that other perspective at the table, and frankly, it as a counselor, I did it and found I pushed my way into it, but I found that it helped me get to know the budget better, a lot better, and it forced me to be ready to answer questions. So it was a cool opportunity. The only thing that we would ask, because of the television appearances, people who are up for election, CCTV gets a little finicky about that. It gets a little complicated if you're running for an election too. So they typically have expressed in the past that they prefer, you get into issues about people getting more face time. They typically have asked that city councilors that are not up for re-election do their presentations. As a matter of fact, I think when I was up, I had to sit out the budget presentation.
Eric and I did it last year.
Yeah, that's right, because they were like, you can't do the presentation, so. So Christine, how something to think about as we go into it, what are the driving interests? What's that?
I said I'll do it.
You guys can think about it, you can connect and talk if you want to, that's good. And that's something actually before the next meeting, I'll put some thought in to bringing a more built-out outreach schedule, because I think we need to and have to, because I think the expectation, because of the complexities of this ballot, of our communications should be a lot higher on ourselves, and we should discuss materials and things like that too. So I will work with Jesse on that. Go ahead in the next meeting. What else? Anything from what you can see so far that would make this easier, or any information you think is missing? You can see that our goal is just to dump a bunch of information on it. No, I mean, this is very comprehensive, so it's a great start, but there will be something. Okay. If not, we'll move forward with that process as outlined. Yes, we will turn back for questions. Questions, comments, concerns from the public?
I just want to echo what you said about presentations. It's very good. Heard some others in the past. And very easy to understand, and I know what's going on, what's being asked so far.
And a big difference this year, for those watching at home who have watched the first one, is the philosophical task was different this year than years past. We didn't say, bring us a net zero impact budget. We acknowledged, back in October, we just said, we're not going to ask you to do that this year. Bring us back a level service budget. And then if you need to make some adjustments within the level service, let's acknowledge the fact that there's going to be a natural appreciation of cost. which is a philosophical shift for the community from a budgeting perspective, but is one I think that, in working with the current administration too in this group, it was felt to be more appropriate and reflective of the reality of budgeting. So. Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so seeing and hearing none. Thank you all very much for all the work that it took to get here. We appreciate it. We look forward to working with you over the next couple of months to get a budget that's going. Okay. We have one other item on tonight's agenda. We have approval for the Pine Grove Terrace stormwater management upgrades.
So this item is for, we received a DEC block grant for stormwater improvements for Pine Grove Terrace. This is part of our MS4 permit, our municipal stormwater permit. So within that permit, there's a requirement that's called a flow restoration plan that basically it requires us to do some water quality improvements for the watershed that is tributary to Morehouse Brook. So this project was identified in that flow restoration plan, and basically what we've been doing is kind of keep an eye out for potential grants that we can use to construct and finish design on this project.
Mm-hmm.
So this project total cost is $158,701. That includes engineering and complete construction permits. The DEC block grant is a 50% cost share, so we would be required to front $79,350 approximately. So what I'm requesting is authorization to receive the grant and transfer of reserve funds from the sewer fund to cover those costs. This was not a budget item for this year's budget.
Yeah, this one's been on the list for a while. It always piques the interest of people who were around when Morehouse, when that development occurred, so, but it's great to see us taking care of it. Questions, concerns from council for John, Jesse?
Just to be clear, this is the final engineering design and construction costs. So total cost of the project would be, on our side, roughly $80,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions or concerns from council? Any questions or concerns from the public? So seeing and hearing none, I entertain motion for approval for the Pine Grove Terrace Stormwater Management Upgrades Grant.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Christine, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. That concludes tonight's regular items. I entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Christine, second by Nicole. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
Meeting